Yo, crew, Captain's Log, Extreme Engineers Episode 3, Frightening Fiascos Trilogy. Before we begin, a word to those listening from harbor, home, or open water. If you value these sea stories, help keep this vessel underway. Drop a coin in the treasure chest. Details are in the About section. If you have a story of your own, throw us a line at ghostboatadventures@gmail.com. Now then, some people think the sea is fought on deck. Wind, waves, visibility, navigation. But the real battle is often fought below. In the heat, in noise, in darkness, where steel either lives or fails. Captain's Log, Extreme Engineers. There is a misunderstanding among those who have never worked a vessel. They imagine engines are obedient machines. You start them, you steer, they comply. That is not how it works. A working fishing vessel is less like a vehicle and more like a living organism held together by noise, pressure, and persuasion. And the ones doing the persuading are the engineers. Hobo, the first lesson. I met my first real engineer when I was 16 years old. His name was not important. Nobody used it. We called him Hobo. The captain, my cousin, hired me on and gave me one piece of advice before I ever stepped aboard. Whatever you do, don't stand downwind from Hobo. Hobo did not believe in showers. He did not believe in changing clothes. He believed only in engines. And despite every outward appearance suggesting otherwise, he was one of the finest engineers I would ever sail with. I learned that quickly. One morning we lay at anchor on a remote stretch of coast, the kind of place where help is not coming, and radios feel very small. The main engine would not start. Battery dead. No propulsion. No way home. The auxiliary engine, our only hope, was half broken and missing its exhaust system. When Hobo finally coaxed into life, the engine room filled instantly with black smoke. Not a haze, a wall. I lasted perhaps 30 seconds before stumbling back up the ladder, choking. Hobo stayed. He soaked a rag in water, tied it across his mouth, and disappeared back into the smoke like a miner entering a collapsed shaft. Inside that suffocating darkness, he hand cranked, adjusted, improvised, and somehow forced enough life into that crippled system. Jumped the main engine. Minutes later, the big engine turned over. We were moving again. No speech, no celebration. Hobo just nodded once, wiped his hands, and went back to work. That was my first lesson. Engineers do not fix things because they are comfortable. They fix them because there is no alternative. Rick, when steel begins to lose. Years later, I sailed aboard the Quatsino. Our engineer was Rick. Rick looked like he had stepped out of another century. Broad shoulders, pale-eyed, always carrying the marks of hard living. He drank too much. He laughed too loud. But he knew that engine room better than anyone. One calm summer day, we were running hard for the cannery with a full load of sockeye salmon. Flat seas, bright sky. Everything above deck said we were fine. Rick came up from below with a look I have never forgotten. Not fear, not panic, recognition. He walked straight aft and motioned for me to follow. We stood near the stern tank, where refrigerated seawater circulated through the catch. Deck vibrated heavily under propulsion strain. Rick pulled a dull butter knife from his pocket. Not a tool, a butter knife. He looked at me and said, "Watch this." Then he pushed it straight down into the wooden deck. It slid through like soft fruit. Immediately water bubbled up through the hole. Rick began to laugh, not out of humor, but disbelief, shaking his head at the vessel like a disappointed parent. Below us, seawater was already finding its way where it did not belong. The structure was tired. The strain was too much. Rick knew. That moment told me everything I needed to know. Not long after I left that boat, and sometime later the Quatsino sank. Second lesson. An engineer often knows a vessel is dying long before anyone else can see it. Stuart, the engineer's breed. Third story is not mine alone. It belongs to my cousin Stuart. He was the engineer aboard a seiner that had finally landed a full hard-won catch. The hold was loaded with salmon. They were running at speed towards Prince Rupert. Then the vessel began to take on water badly. The crew abandoned into the seine skiff as the situation worsened. They shouted for Stuart to come up. He did not, because engineers were trained by habit, by instinct, by stubbornness to try one more thing, one more adjustment, one more chance to save the ship. Stuart went back down. The engine room flooded completely. He took one breath, and when there was nothing left to do, he swam upward through the submerged machinery toward the only light he could see. He surfaced beside the skiff, where the crew hauled him aboard. The vessel was lost, but Stuart survived. Third lesson: engineers do not abandon systems. They stay until the system abandons them. Reflection. You barely see these people in photographs. They are not at the wheel. They are not on deck watching the horizon. They are below, listening to vibration, feeling temperature changes through steel, diagnosing problems by sound alone. They work where the air is hotter, where the noise never stops, where mistakes are immediate and unforgiving. And when everything goes right, nobody notices them at all. That is the strange success of engineering at sea. If they do their job perfectly, their existence is invisible. Closing reflection. Ships are remembered. Storms are remembered. Even captains are remembered. But often the ones who kept the machinery alive long enough for any story to exist or not. So this log stands for them. The difficult ones. The brilliant ones. The stubborn ones who refuse to let steel fail quietly. Extreme engineers. We value these stories and want to keep Ghost Boat afloat. Drop a coin in the treasure chest. Link is in the about section. If you've got a sea story of your own, throw us a line at ghostboatadventures@gmail.com. Do diligently to follow and shout Captain Jordan and his crew of ghosts over and